You're listening to Overhead Story Channel. Enjoy.
The morning I noticed the first crack in everything I thought I knew, the Oklahoma sky was just starting to lighten. It was one of those humid, early summer days that made you sweat before you even finished your coffee. I had woken up before my alarm, laced up my running shoes, and left the house for what was supposed to be a 6-mile loop. Routine. Unremarkable. Safe. But halfway through my route I cut it short. No reason, really. Maybe it was the ache in my knee or maybe just a gut feeling. One of those unexplainable urges you shrug off until it becomes something else. I took the back road home, passed by the fire station, jogged through the park, skipped the usual gas station stop. When I reached the front door, I was almost proud of myself for making it back with 30 minutes to spare. Then I heard the door upstairs slam shut. Not just close slam. Sharp and sudden, like someone didn't want to be heard but forgot that panic made people loud. I stood in the foyer, half inside, half still planted in the threshold. Something shifted in my stomach. I closed the door quietly behind me and turned my head. There, on the arm of the couch, sat a jacket. Not mine. It was a man's jacket, clearly. Black, synthetic, too shiny to be real leather. The sleeves were bunched like it had been dropped in a hurry, and I noticed a crumpled receipt sticking out of the inner pocket. I took a step closer. That's when the scent hit me, some cheap cologne that reeked of high school gym lockers and desperation. Way too much of it. And definitely not something I owned or would ever wear. I froze. My hands were still sticky with sweat from the run, but now it felt cold. A different kind of sweat. My ears strained. Upstairs, I heard footsteps, barefoot, fast, then slower, more composed. The kind of pacing someone does when they're trying to control the chaos in their head. Seconds later, Scarlett appeared at the top of the stairs. She was dressed fully. Jeans, a tucked-in tank, earrings already in place. Her damp hair was pulled over one shoulder like she'd just stepped out of the shower. She was holding the jacket. I looked at her, trying to read her expression. It was too calm. Smoothed over like a pre-recorded commercial. Her tone when she spoke? Even more unsettling. "Oh, you're back early," she said, almost cheerful. "You scared me." She offered a light laugh that didn't match the tension in the room. The smell of cologne on the jacket seemed to grow stronger between us. I said nothing. She held the jacket out casually like she was presenting it for a lost and found bin. "This? It's Kyle's," she said, voice calm and confident. "He dropped by yesterday to go over the silent auction stuff for the fundraiser. You know, the nonprofit thing I've been working on? Anyway, he forgot it. It's been here since then." I nodded slowly. Kyle? Vague name, vague memory. She'd mentioned someone by that name once during a conversation about local board members and project proposals. But I couldn't recall ever seeing him in our house, let alone hearing that he came by often enough to forget a jacket. She didn't wait for a response. She descended the stairs like nothing was wrong, glancing toward the kitchen, then back at me. "Are the kids still asleep?" she asked. "Yeah," I muttered. I watched her turn and head back upstairs, jacket in hand, humming softly as if the conversation hadn't left a jagged edge in the air. As if everything was just fine. But it wasn't. After she disappeared, I walked slowly toward the couch. I looked at the spot where the jacket had been, then turned toward the back door. I don't know why. I just did. Something about the air in the house felt rearranged. Like furniture had been moved slightly, then put back. Like someone had tried to scrub the house clean but missed a few fingerprints. I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror. My heart was still racing, not from the run, but from the surge of suspicion now curling through me like smoke. That jacket hadn't been there when I left. Of that I was certain. I thought back to the slam upstairs, the rush in her footsteps, the weird tone of her voice. None of it fit. Scarlett was good at a lot of things, decorating, event planning, convincing people to donate money to local causes, but she wasn't a good liar. At least, she hadn't been. Now, I wasn't so sure. The rest of the morning passed like I was underwater. Breakfast, school drop-offs, emails, all a blur. Scarlett acted normal, even affectionate. She kissed my cheek before leaving for her own errands and meetings. I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. Almost. But as soon as the house was quiet again, I returned to the couch. No jacket. No trace of the scent. She'd removed it fast and efficiently. Like she was trying to erase something. I sat down and stared at the ceiling. I knew what I saw. I knew what I smelled. And I knew deep in my bones that something was off. Not just with the jacket. Not just with her explanation. With her. Scarlett had never cared much for early mornings. She preferred sleeping in, especially on days when she didn't have to wrangle the kids for school. But today, she was up before everyone, fully dressed with wet hair and a fake smile. She practically greeted me like I was a guest in my own house. I couldn't stop replaying it. The moment I walked in, the expression on her face, the way her hands gripped the jacket just a little too tightly, and the way she didn't ask why I was home early. That's what hit me later. She didn't ask. She didn't say, "What are you doing back so soon?" or "I thought your run took longer." She just adapted. Like she'd expected the possibility. Like she had a contingency plan ready. That was the first trace. A sliver of something I hadn't seen before. A shadow in the routine. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. After that morning with the jacket, life didn't return to normal. At least, not for me. On the surface, nothing had changed. Scarlett still made breakfast, still reminded the kids about homework, still scrolled Instagram beside me in bed. But beneath it all, something was different. Subtle. Quiet. Like someone had altered the background music of our lives and only I could hear it. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. Just stress. Or insecurity. But then the little things began to accumulate, those tiny moments that you usually shrug off until they start forming a pattern. Scarlett had never been a gym enthusiast. She used to joke that her idea of cardio was chasing our youngest through the backyard. But suddenly she was obsessed with late-night workouts. 3, sometimes 4 times a week, she'd throw on leggings and a tight tank top and announce she was going to the studio. Sometimes she'd even leave after 9 p.m., coming home after midnight, claiming she'd stayed late to help clean or stretch. She also developed a newfound love for client Zoom calls, though I never saw her open her laptop. Once, she took one of these so-called calls from the bedroom with the door locked, a towel stuffed at the bottom like she was keeping out sound. When I knocked, she waved me off, said it was a sensitive donor issue. Her voice was different, too. Softer. Rehearsed. One Saturday, she announced she was going grocery shopping and came downstairs wearing makeup, a sundress, and wedge heels just to pick up milk and eggs, supposedly. I watched her change outfits 3 times before finally settling on one that looked more suited for date night than a trip to Aldi. She didn't come back for 6 hours. When I asked about it, she gave a breezy answer about getting caught in traffic and running into an old friend. Then she asked if I could unload the groceries that barely filled one bag. I noticed other oddities too. My old laptop, which had been sitting under the guest bed for years, suddenly showed signs of use. It had a freshly taped-over webcam, a cleared browser history, and an unfamiliar login pattern. I only found out because our daughter was looking for it to play Minecraft. Mom said I couldn't use it, she told me, eyes wide. She said it was for her meetings now. Scarlett had also changed the password on her phone. Again. That made 3 times in as many weeks. When I asked why, she laughed and said she was tightening security because the kids were always snooping. But none of them even had the passcode before. She'd started texting more often, too. Rapid-fire thumbs in the corner of the room, screen tilted away. Once, when she stepped out for a coffee run, I saw a text flash across her lock screen, a winky face emoji and the word later. With a contact name I didn't recognize. Just initials. DL. I don't know why, but I memorized the initials immediately. I couldn't stop thinking about them. Later that night, I asked if she was texting someone new from the nonprofit. She looked at me, blinked twice, and said, "What? No. Why?" "No reason," I replied. But there was a reason. There were dozens. Our kids began dropping clues, too, innocently, unintentionally, like kids always do. One day, our youngest was drawing a picture of Mommy's house friend and showed me a stick figure with spiky hair holding hands with a woman in a pink dress. When I asked who it was, she said, "The man that comes when you're at work. He plays peekaboo." I swallowed the lump in my throat and asked, "What's his name?" "I don't know," she said, shrugging. "But Mommy knows him. She says he's just visiting." Another time, I came home from work to find our son playing with a model airplane I didn't recognize. "Uncle David gave it to me," he said. "Uncle David?" I asked. He nodded eagerly. He brought snacks too. Scarlett never mentioned anyone named David. I scrolled through her texts. Nothing. I started digging. I looked through her email when she left her laptop open. Nothing concrete, but I noticed she'd changed her primary recovery email. She'd deleted every sent message in the last month. 2. Every single one. She'd also unlinked our shared calendar. Said it was too cluttered. I checked our bank statements. That's when it really started clicking into place. Scarlett had taken out cash. Repeatedly. Always under $200. Always on the same day of the week, Wednesdays. There were also Uber charges that didn't match up with any of her known destinations and Venmo transactions with cryptic captions like, "Flowers Cherry Blossom." and laughs faced with tears of joy, sent to usernames I didn't recognize. The strangest part? A few of the charges were tagged to a cafe on the far side of town. A cafe neither of us had ever been to before. I drove by once just to see. It was the kind of spot with soft music and dim lighting, tucked away behind a bookstore. Perfect place for secrecy. One day I tested something. I told Scarlett I had a last-minute work trip and would be gone overnight. She barely reacted. No concern, no questions. Just, okay, have fun. I didn't leave town. Instead, I parked down the street and watched our house from inside my truck. At 3:17 p.m., a man pulled into the driveway in a silver Honda. He didn't knock. Scarlett met him at the door. They hugged. Not a quick, friendly hug. A slow, familiar one. Then they went inside. I didn't wait to see more. I drove away, stomach twisting. That night, when I walked through the door as if nothing had happened, she didn't flinch. She smiled and asked if I wanted leftovers. Acted like it was any other Thursday night. But I could barely speak. Something had shifted. No, something had snapped. All the weird changes, the half-truths, the forced laughter. It wasn't random. It was calculated. There was a rhythm to it, like a song she'd been playing behind my back for weeks. Maybe months. And now it was loud enough that I couldn't pretend not to hear it anymore. I had tried to ignore the signs. Tried to rationalize, to hope, to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was overthinking it all. But the night I saw that silver Honda pull into our driveway, everything changed. The time for doubt had passed. I needed the truth, and I needed it in a way that couldn't be twisted or explained away. Scarlett had always rolled her eyes when I went overboard with smart tech in the house. Motion-activated lights, doorbell cams, garage sensors, all of it seemed excessive to her. But I liked knowing things worked. I liked proof. And now that obsession was about to pay off. She'd forgotten about the old tablet. It was one of those off-brand devices we'd bought for the kids to use in the car on long trips years ago. It barely held a charge anymore, but it was still synced to the smart home system. Buried under laundry in the hallway cabinet, it hadn't been touched in months. She probably assumed it was dead. It wasn't. Late that night, after she fell asleep, I powered it up, and I started watching. The security system kept short clips from the outdoor cameras, front porch, side yard, back patio. But it was the indoor camera that told the real story. The one Scarlett didn't even remember I'd installed in the den when we were first testing the setup. I'd hidden it inside an old bookshelf, more for novelty than necessity. But it still worked. It had been silently recording, backing up footage to our shared cloud, under a folder neither of us checked in years. Until now, the first few clips were ordinary, boring even. Scarlett folding laundry, the kids running through the living room, pizza delivery, nothing unusual. Then I found the day of the jacket. The timestamp was clear, Tuesday, 9:04 a.m. The clip opened with Scarlett at the front door. She wasn't wearing the jeans and tank top I saw her in later that morning. She was in pajamas. Her hair was up, messy. She looked flustered, glancing out the window like she was waiting for something. And then the camera caught him. Tall, athletic build, short brown hair, dressed in a gray Henley and jeans. He approached the house with a practiced casualness, like he'd done it before. Scarlett opened the door before he could knock. She didn't greet him with a handshake or a wave. She stepped into him. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and his went around her waist. They kissed, long and slow before disappearing from view. My stomach turned. I fast-forwarded. 10 minutes. 20. 40. At 10:53 a.m., they reappeared in the den. He was holding her hand. She laughed, leaned into his shoulder. They stood close, too close, and then she led him upstairs. Her hand on the small of his back. The last thing I saw before they vanished up the steps was her looking over her shoulder, grinning like a teenager. I paused the video and stared at the screen. No sound, just images, just movement. But it was enough. It was all I needed. The video had no ambiguity, no room for excuses. This wasn't a business meeting or a charity consult. It wasn't Kyle from the board. It wasn't innocent. It was something practiced, something they'd done before. And the way she smiled, it wasn't new. My hands trembled as I set the tablet down. I stood up and paced the room, chest tight, breath short. I felt like I was trapped in my own skin, like I needed to run again but didn't know where to go. There were more videos, days I hadn't even thought to question. Different angles, different clothes, same man. Once, they came in through the back door, both laughing, heads low. Another time, he parked around the corner and walked in through the garage, using the keypad. That meant she gave him the code. That meant he wasn't just a guest. He was something else. He was part of her life. Our life. Without me. I sat back down, numb. I watched the clips over and over, until the tablet's battery died and the screen went black. That silence, it was louder than anything else. The next morning, I woke up before her. I moved through the house like a ghost, checking doors, drawers, schedules. Watching her, now through different eyes. Scarlett didn't act any different. She asked if I wanted toast or waffles. Told the kids to remember their backpacks. Kissed me on the cheek and told me to have a good day. Like nothing had changed. But it had. And it was no longer about suspicions or what-ifs. The truth was right there. Cold. Mechanical. Undeniable. The man I saw on that screen had never been introduced to me. Never mentioned, never explained. Scarlett had created an entire side life around him. A web of lies so detailed, so layered, that I almost admired the effort. Almost. But admiration turned quickly to resolve. That night, after she went to sleep, I backed up the footage to a hard drive. Every clip, every timestamp. I created a new folder, encrypted it, and saved a copy to an external source. Then I organized the files by date, labeling them in neutral terms. Entry 1, Clip A, Staircase Event. It felt clinical, sterile, but necessary. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed more. The next day, while she took the kids to a birthday party, I checked our garage opener logs. Scarlett's car had come and gone during hours she claimed to be elsewhere. I printed a copy. I reviewed her text backups, partial ones still connected to the family data plan. Several messages had no attached names, just numbers. But one, labeled D, appeared repeatedly, always short, vague. Same time. I miss you. Back door. Lock it. I saved those too. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, silent, in the center of a house that was no longer mine. A house that had been used like a stage for a lie I wasn't invited to witness. I realized something then. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't insecure. I had known. My body had known. My instincts had screamed for weeks. And now, with everything laid bare, I could finally stop doubting myself. I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing my marriage. But at least now I had the proof. Undeniable. Unfiltered. Unforgivable. I didn't explode. I didn't confront Scarlett with the videos or scream or throw anything. I didn't even ask a single question. That surprised me more than anything. The old me, last year's version, would have demanded answers, held up the evidence like a wee *p*n, and asked why. But now I was operating on something colder, sharper, the kind of clarity that only comes when everything you built burns down right in front of you. I started with backups. Everything I had, videos, texts, timestamps, door logs, was copied to 3 different locations. One stayed on my laptop. The second went to a thumb drive I stored inside a sealed envelope at the office. The third I uploaded to a private cloud folder, locked with 2-factor authentication only I could access. This wasn't just for insurance. This was a blueprint, a map out of the wreckage. Next came the lawyer, Lauren. I hadn't planned to involve her. We'd worked together for nearly 8 years, co-founders of a small but successful consulting firm downtown. She'd always been sharp, patient, and impossible to rattle. She was also the only person I trusted enough to tell the full story. When I showed her the clips, she didn't gasp or cry. She just leaned back in her chair and said, "How long has this been going on?" "Months," I said. "Maybe more. And you're sure it's not just one guy? No others?" I hesitated, then nodded. "I'm sure." She looked at the video again. then sighed. Well, she's not subtle. No, I agreed. She's not. Lauren became my lifeline. She referred me to a discreet family attorney named Mendez, an older man with sharp eyes and no patience for drama. His advice was immediate. Document everything, touch nothing, and act only when the time was right. So I did. I began separating accounts. Quietly. I opened a new checking account in my name alone, linked to a different bank with paperless statements. I redirected my direct deposits and canceled the auto-pay features Scarlett didn't know existed. I also froze the credit cards she rarely used but had access to. Claimed it was fraud prevention. She didn't ask questions. Not then. I changed my passwords, updated my recovery emails, and started removing myself from anything we'd once shared online: Netflix, Hulu, cloud storage. Each little step was a stitch in the divide. A slow, surgical untangling. The next part was harder. Our finances. Scarlett had always been passionate about starting her own business. Over the past 2 years, she'd launched a small home design brand, an online boutique that sold custom prints, decor packages, and downloadable templates. She called it her independent baby, something she built on her own from scratch. Except it wasn't. What she didn't know, what she never really asked, was that her business had been funded by me. Every one of her anonymous grants or unexpected donors was carefully orchestrated by Lauren and me through shell contributions, redirected invoices, and passive investment channels we set up to support her without making it obvious. I believed in her dream. Back then, at least. Now, I traced every penny. Every payout. Every shell. I mapped out the financial arteries that kept her company alive and began slowly turning the valves. Not shutting things down yet, but restricting movement. Freezing expansion. Halting its spends. The boutique ran on borrowed time, and Scarlett didn't even realize she'd been running a race with my money at her back. Lauren also helped me secure a forensic accountant. Quiet. Efficient. Ruthless. They confirmed what I suspected: Scarlett had dipped into our joint funds for private purchases. Travel, gifts, boutique expenses she marked as miscellaneous. Some of them aligned with dates from the video footage. That gave Mendez leverage. He filed temporary financial protections under my name. I signed paperwork that restricted her access to specific shared assets and prepped the forms for temporary custody. Custody. That word hit harder than I expected. Scarlett was still a mother. Still sang to the kids at night, still left handwritten notes in their lunchboxes. They didn't know. Couldn't know. Not yet. So I played the part. I made pancakes on Saturdays. Helped with homework. Watched movies in the living room while pretending everything was fine. But behind the scenes? I was building the exit. I started sleeping in the guest room. I told her I had early calls and needed the quiet. She didn't question it. In fact, she seemed almost relieved. Her patterns didn't change. She still disappeared for hours. Still whispered on the phone when she thought I couldn't hear. Still smiled like a woman with no consequences. But consequences were coming. The night I finalized the first draft of the divorce petition, I looked at our wedding photo for the last time. It had always hung in the hallway, black and white, candid, framed with a quote about forever. I took it down and placed it in a drawer. Not out of anger. Just out of closure. There were moments, even in the planning, where I doubted myself. Was I doing the right thing? Was I being cold? Should I confront her? But every time I felt myself wavering, I watched the video again. Just the first 30 seconds. Her at the door. His arms around her. The kiss. That was enough. Enough to remind me that what we had was already gone. That the woman in the video wasn't Scarlett the wife or Scarlett the mother, she was someone else entirely. Someone who didn't think I'd ever find out. But I had. And now I was writing the ending. Not with fire. Not with vengeance. But with preparation. With control. With silence. Because the loudest thing I could ever say to her would be the moment I finally said nothing at all. It happened on a Thursday. Scarlett was supposed to return from a business trip to Dallas. That's what she called it in her calendar. Fundraising pitch DTX. She'd packed a suitcase 4 days earlier with more care than usual: 4 outfits, 2 sets of heels, makeup she rarely used anymore. I watched from the hallway as she folded her favorite blouse into a tight roll and zipped the bag shut with a soft hum on her lips. She didn't know I already knew she wasn't meeting any donors. She wasn't going to any pitch. She was meeting him. The same man from the videos. I traced one of their Uber receipts to the same hotel listed on her reservation. Same suite level. Same check-in time. The details weren't even subtle anymore. They didn't have to be. In her mind, I was still in the dark, still trusting, still dull, still Justin. But Justin was gone. And when she returned, so was her place in this house. She came back around 8:15 p.m. I'd been watching her Uber's location for 10 minutes before the alert pinged my phone. I didn't move from the den. The cameras picked up the headlights as the car pulled into the driveway. But this time, the gate didn't open. She tried her code. Once, twice, the third time. I watched from the tablet as her finger hovered over the keypad. She stepped back, stared at the sensor. Tried again. Invalid entry. She pressed the video intercom button. I didn't answer. She waited. Pressed again. Still nothing. Her brows furrowed. She checked her phone. Called once. Then again. I didn't answer those either. I just watched her from the camera feed, standing at the gate in a crisp white blouse, suitcase by her side, the evening wind catching strands of her hair. Her face wasn't angry. Not yet. It was confused. Slightly annoyed. Maybe embarrassed. Then she saw the box. It was a medium-sized storage container, sealed with packing tape and set neatly by the side entrance. On top were 2 envelopes, held in place with a smooth river stone from the backyard. One Scarlett had collected with our daughter during a nature walk last spring. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The first envelope contained her legal notice of asset removal. Mendez had filed the paperwork that morning. It wasn't finalized yet, but it was enough to revoke her access to joint accounts, utilities, and digital property connected to the business. Her name was scrubbed from the LLC she'd proudly claimed as her own. We held the hosting rights, the client lists, even the design templates she swore were her original work. The second envelope was thicker. It held a document outlining financial restitution for misused funds, expenses labeled as marketing and consulting that the forensic accountant traced back to personal outings, hotels, and one particularly expensive leather duffel bag she'd gifted him. Attached to the top was a single page, a screensh *T, a direct message from her private account, one she assumed I'd never see. In it, she described me as reliable but painfully boring, saying I was useful as long as the checks cleared. The message was timestamped 2 weeks before our anniversary. Below the screensh *T, I'd written just 2 words in ink. Noted. Goodbye. Scarlett stood there for several minutes. Long enough for the porch light to switch off. Long enough for the wind to scatter a few leaves across the walkway. She looked around like she was waiting for a camera crew to yell, "Cut!" Like this was some kind of joke. But no one came. She opened the box. Inside were her essentials. Wallet, keys, phone charger, a framed picture of her and the kids, jewelry she'd left in the bathroom, a few folded items of clothing, just enough to cover a few nights. Everything else? Left behind. She took the envelopes, closed the box, and pulled out her phone again. One text. Scarlett, Justin. What is this? Why can't I get in? I didn't respond. Another followed. Scarlett. Is this a mistake? Please open the gate. We need to talk. Still nothing. Finally, a call. I declined it without hesitation. She sat on the steps. I could see her head bowed on the screen, her hand pressed to her mouth, shoulders shaking. I don't know if she was crying or just panicking, but she stayed like that for a long time. I watched, silent, just like I'd watched her sneak through lies and alleyways for months. The woman I loved was in that frame somewhere, but she was buried under someone else now. Someone colder, more calculated, someone I wouldn't recognize if I passed her on the street. Eventually, she stood, lifted the box, walked down the drive. She paused at the edge of the sidewalk, looking up at the house as if expecting someone to stop her. No one did. No goodbye from the kids. No open door. No second chance. She got into another Uber. It pulled away slowly, its taillights dimming into the night. I didn't move until the tablet screen went black. The house was still. The kids were asleep upstairs. The porch light remained off. Everything felt quiet but not hollow. Felt clean. Scarlett's presence had always carried a weight. Not just physical but energetic. Even in silence, she filled a room. Now the air felt breathable again. Honest, even. I didn't celebrate. Didn't drink or blast music or call Lauren to say, "It's done." I just sat there for a while, listening to the clock tick. The same one that hung above our mantel for 10 years. The same one she said clashed with the new color palette. I never replaced it. Some things deserve to stay even when everything else fell apart. Later that night, I walked the house, room by room. Her makeup was still in the bathroom drawer. I tossed it in a bag. The coffee mug with her name? Into the donation bin. Her side of the closet was mostly empty already, but I folded what remained and added it to the box she'd left behind. No dramatics. No tearing or smashing. Just closure. I left the master bedroom door open for the first time in weeks. Washed the sheets. Changed the pillowcases. Opened the window. Let the night air in. By midnight, I was asleep. Not passed out. Not restless. Just asleep. For the first time in a long time. Scarlett didn't show up unannounced. She didn't bang on the door or throw accusations through a phone call. When she finally reappeared, it was at a scheduled legal mediation meeting 2 weeks after she'd been removed from the house. She walked into the office wearing a sleek navy dress and heels I hadn't seen before. Her hair was done, makeup fresh. She smiled at the receptionist like it was a routine meeting. But that smile didn't last. When she stepped into the conference room and saw me, she blinked hard, then glanced quickly at the lawyer sitting beside me. Mendez had come prepared, his folders stacked neatly, every detail of her double life itemized and validated. Across the table sat her legal team, 2 younger attorneys who looked like they were still trying to figure out what kind of case they were walking into. One flipped open a folder. The other pulled out a legal pad. Scarlett took a breath and opened her mouth like she was about to speak, but Mendez spoke first. He laid out the facts in clear, clinical language. Bank statements detailing the reallocation of marital assets. *TS of deleted messages recovered from cloud backups. IP logs tracing communication between her and the man she denied knowing. A timeline mapping each of her business trips to specific locations and transactions. Then he dropped the final piece, NDA violations. Apparently, Scarlett had discussed confidential projects tied to my company with third parties, including her lover. She'd used examples and client names in emails. That alone was enough to file a separate claim under intellectual property misuse. Her lawyers sat in stunned silence. Scarlett? She stopped smiling. When Mendez slid the documentation across the table, she didn't even reach for it. Her custody rights were placed under review due to behavior inconsistent with the welfare of the children. Her creative business accounts had already been suspended. She couldn't access them even if she tried. And the branding materials? Registered under my company's umbrella. She'd never verified the contracts. Scarlett looked between all of us. I expected her to lash out, to deny it all or throw blame. Instead, she sat quietly. Her confidence crumbled in real time, like a performer realizing the curtain wasn't closing, just being pulled back. She whispered something to her lawyers. One nodded slowly. There was no objection, no defense, just silence. Everything had already been executed, and now all that was left was the wreckage. I didn't stay in Oklahoma. The decision came quickly, almost instinctively. A week after the final meeting, I packed up what I needed, signed the last of the paperwork, and relocated to Colorado with the kids. Lauren helped make the transition seamless. She'd been patient through all of it. Never intrusive, always grounded. She coordinated the logistics while I focused on the children and their routines. We didn't make any dramatic announcements, just quietly slipped away from the life Scarlett once claimed ownership of. We bought a modest home in a town nestled near the foothills. Enough space for the kids to have their own rooms, a backyard with actual trees, and a view that didn't feel like surveillance. It was peaceful, free. Meanwhile, back in Oklahoma, Scarlett stayed behind. But what was she staying for? Her accounts had been frozen pending legal reviews. Her boutique, once her pride and joy, was under new administration, legally transferred through clauses she never bothered to read. Her client list? Gone. Intellectual property seized. Reputation in tatters. The friends she used to confide in stopped returning her calls. The colleagues she manipulated were now testifying under sealed affidavits. She wasn't just removed, she was erased. Scarlett had spent so long crafting an illusion of independence, of power. She had convinced herself she was the architect of her success. But the truth? She'd been walking through a house I built, funded with trust she mistook for weakness. And now she was locked out of that house. Metaphorically, literally. I didn't follow up. I didn't check her socials or ask around. The last image I had of her was through a monitor, standing at the edge of our property, clutching a box she didn't pack herself, reading a letter she never expected to see. That was enough. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. I had the kids, I had the truth, and I had the chance to build something real again. And she had her silence. The final cut wasn't an explosion. It was absence. And it was permanent.